Hello, everyone. My name is Felix Heri from Lucerne Festival, and I am very happy to welcome you to the second Lucerne Festival Forward webinar today. It's great to have you all with us. I would like to immediately hand over to Helga, co-host of this webinar and member of the Lucerne Festival Contemporary Leaders. Please, Helga.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar dedicated to presenting the Lucerne Festival Forward. And today we're going to dive straight into the Lucerne Festival Forward program, talk about the pieces, talk about the concerts that we have for you in November. We'll take a closer look at some of the themes, or our main themes, our passions, our mission of our festival, and have conversations with performers, composers, and hopefully with you, our wonderful audience. Before we dive into discussion about music and art, there are just a few technical details, as always, with these online sessions to clarify. So our webinar is being recorded, so that those who are not here today with us can join us later. And also, if you didn't have a chance to see our first webinar that happened last week, please check out our YouTube link. The link is available on our social media platforms. You can see the recording there and catch up. At the bottom of your screen here in Zoom, you can see an option, Q&A. And so we have somebody specifically dedicated to answering your questions. So feel free to ask anything at any point, and either you will receive an answer during the webinar there, or maybe the questions will be saved up and we will talk about them live at the end of the webinar. And our webinar will last for about an hour, of which the last 10 minutes will be dedicated to discussion with all of you. So at the bottom of the screen, there is also an option called raise hand. So feel free to use that at the end of the webinar, and we would love to hear your voices and just to chat with you and to talk to you. So during the last webinar, we had the Q&A section, which was wonderful, and we received a very interesting and I think very important question that resonated with all of us, which was, why have composers and performers drifted apart since the 20th century? And I think all of us, the performers, the contemporary leaders, the composers, we are aware that that is a problem, and we're aware that that is the connection that needs to be rebuilt and needs to get stronger. And we're hoping that through our Lucerne Festival Forward, we can bar by bar, score by score, concert by concert, rebuild that connection and make it stronger. And that's why the main theme of our festival is networks. And now I have the great honor to present you the program of Lucerne Festival Forward. So the program was actually published yesterday, and now somebody will link the concert program or the festival program for you in the chat. Thank you, Ben. There we go. And through that link, you can explore the program on your own. And now we will just have a quick look. I will share my screen. I will not talk about every single piece and detail, but we will just see what we have here. And I will mention what was the idea behind each concert. And of course, it is important to mention again that some of the pieces were actually project proposals from the Academy alumni community. So I will tell you which pieces or which concerts were part of that. So as you can see, on Friday, on the 19th, we're starting very late night concert. It's a big bang of our festival. It's a big piece by Dutch composer Louis Andriessen, Workers Union. It's a loud sounding group of instruments that's going to open our festival. And we were, of course, saddened to learn that he passed a month ago. And additionally to this being a beautiful piece about reuniting and playing together and finally have the chance to meet all of our friends and play and open the festival, we also wanted to pay tribute to this wonderful composer and his life work. On Saturday, we have a day concert, museum concert in Kunstmuseum Lucerne. So there will be a beautiful installation presenting Vivian Sutter's Argentinian Swiss painter or artist. She will have beautiful cotton canvases all over the museum with very rich colors on them, and our musicians will do a free improvisation based on the impression they will get from wonderful artwork. And then later on Saturday, we will have two concerts, and you can see here composers such Anne Lockwood and George Lewis and Paulina Oliveros, Luis Fernando Amaya, and so on. And lots of pieces in these concerts are pieces with open score or open instrumentation. We have a graphical score, we have a text score. And I think this is a beautiful part of the networks idea. We will have to work so closely with each other. Each musician will have to truly connect with one another to create this music, to be part of this wonderful music making. And I think this is really, really important to us. Actually, the piece by Paulina Oliveros, or the composer Paulina Oliveros, was presented to us by our colleague Nathan Watts, who wrote project proposal with this composer in mind, and lots of us actually heard about this composer for the first time, and we thought that that's an amazing opportunity to make this wonderful composer's music heard. And another piece that was also a project proposal from one of the Lucerne Festival Academy alumni member, Kevin Fairbairn. This piece by Lizzie Lim, Extinction, Events, and Dawn Course for ensemble. I would highly encourage you to go on her website because she writes a wonderful text about the inspiration behind this piece. Basically, it is a statement. It's about ecology, about our planet, about the poisoning effect of plastic on our world and the waters. And it is a very strong statement. And I think taking care about our planet and us people, and really thinking about these things, I feel like resonates with all of our contemporary leaders, and I feel lucky that I'm part of that group that also thinks about these things. And this piece, I think, was very important for all of us to have here in the program. And the second concert, you can see there is a new work, a world premiere commissioned by the Lucerne Festival for the Lucerne Festival Contemporary Orchestra. And it's commissioned by Lucerne Festival Forward from composer Jesse Cox. And we have an honor to actually talk to him today. And so stay tuned, because we can ask all kinds of questions from him about this project and how is this going to happen and what is going on. This is very, very exciting. Then on Sunday, we will start with children's concert. The concert or workshop, actually. And Maggie Haschfracher and Zizi Wang presented a beautiful project proposal with lovely concert ideas that could be presented to children. And me, as an educator and a very passionate person about educating the listeners of tomorrow or the musicians of tomorrow, I really wanted to collaborate with them. So also in collaboration of Ultissimo, which is a Lucerne city-owned big children event for children. On that Sunday, we will present a little workshop for kids where they get to do whatever they want with all different instruments and try out sounds and create music. But most importantly, us, the Lucerne Festival Forward, will come together with our little future audience and to show them a small version of the Forward Festival in that little workshop. Then we have a concert on Sunday later in the day. That's another project proposal by an alumni community member, Joao Carlos Pacheco. presented piece Rice Ball by Michael Pizarro, and this is going to be a piece with audience participation, and we will start the registration for the participation on the 5th of August, so please stay tuned for that as well, because there will be more information coming soon, and this is truly the meaning of networks for us. So the musicians and the audience will come together, and we will show you, our audience, how do we experience contemporary music, how do we make the contemporary music, and we would love for you to be the part of our world. And a late night or evening concert, 7:30 on Sunday, will be, I think, the most classical concert of our, or classical for us new music performers, because most of the pieces are notated traditionally. And here we have Rebecca Saunders, Pierre Boulez, and we will finish with the wonderful big piece, 47-minute piece by Olga Neuvert, Austrian composer, Construction in Space, for 4 soloists, 4 ensemble groups, and live electronics. And the audience will be surrounded by 4 ensembles, and it will truly emerge in the wonderful sound world of the piece. And throughout the festival, we'll offer the audience members a chance to experience something very special. This is a one-to-one performance, a one-to-one concert that will be presented by Winnie Huang. And this is a piece by Charlie Drowledge, 10 for gesturing, vocalizing, performer, and listener. And today we also have the pleasure of welcoming Charlie and Winnie here, and we will know a bit more about this very unique experience. So here we go. This is our festival program. I find it very exciting, and I really can't wait for November to come and for us to play again, to meet all my friends and play together and experience these wonderful pieces. As you have noticed, I talked a lot about listening and how we want to encourage our audience to be part of our experience, to hear us. And even in the children concert, we will focus on listening of the sounds and listening of each other. And listening is an art form. And to talk about listening as an art form and about some of the pieces from our program, I would like to invite my colleague and co-curator and contemporary leader of Lucerne Festival, Ettore Biagi. Ettore, please.
Hi everyone. Hi. Thank you for being here again in this second webinar. I'm very, very happy to talk to you about this program. And yeah, listening has been a word that has been resonating a lot in our numerous meetings since, I would say, since the very beginning, actually. But to start to talk about this, I would really like to start with not just listening, but also another word that has been one of our main concerns: deep listening. These are the 2 words that have been really very present in our discussions. So whoever is familiar with the work of Paulino Oliveros, who's one of the composers, as you have seen from the program we are featuring in the festival. Whoever is familiar with her work immediately thinks about her when hearing these 2 words, deep listening. Paulino Oliveros is one of the composers that me and some of us, as Helga mentioned, discovered thanks to this amazing collective work of the last several weeks. And to talk briefly about her, I would really like to borrow the thoughts of the person that I actually have to thank for letting me discover her art, who is our cellist and fellow leader, Nathan Watts. He couldn't be with us today due to some connection problems, but since he is really, really passionate about this music by Paulino Oliveros, and since I think that passion is contagious, I would just like to go on and maybe read some of his words about the first time that he discovered Paulino Oliveros' music, which also actually links very well to what I'm going to say later. So Nathan says, I was actually first introduced to Pauline Oliveros at Rice University by Ben Roidl-Ward, who's also here, so speaking about network. After she passed away, he programmed her piece, Sound Fishes, and I remember being taken by the fact that it was just a text core and it produced such a rich sound. I didn't go deeper into her music until a couple of years later when I began playing more contemporary music. I was searching for a way to listen to new music with an open mind so that judgment faded away and I could enjoy performances more. I came back to Oliveros and her deep listening practice, and in addition to being more open to contemporary music, I also found myself hearing the world around me more completely. Many of her scores are meditations and not necessarily to be performed, but to remember when you're going about in your life. For example, her score, Country Meditation. Sit by the trees. What kind of tree makes what kind of sound? This score can be performed in secret anywhere the trees exist. And after reading the score, you might actually hear trees differently. These are the words of Nathan, and I think they are really wonderful words. They tell a lot about the beauty of the act of listening. So to dive a little bit into the concept of deep listening, I would like to just follow Pauline Oliveros' indications. When explaining this theme of deep listening during her lectures, she asked the audience to simply rest and perceive the silence around them. Now, the more you do that, of course, the more complexity reaches your consciousness, because the silence is not just silence, there is always something going on. In other words, as you stop being constantly and instinctively selective in your listening, I would say, your perception becomes more and more deep as you go. So when deepness and complexity arise naturally in our perception, it means that we are no longer just hearing, but we are applying an aesthetic and a creative act, which is, of course, the act of listening itself. I would actually like to give you a musical example of this, and it's very simple because I could just switch from the English language to the Italian language, for example. For those who don't understand and speak Italian, it will be impossible to distinguish meanings, as instead it will become easy to perceive rhythms in the language, pitches, colors, and even phrasing. Uno dei compiti principali dell'arte è stato sempre quello di generare esigenze che non è stato in grado di soddisfare attualmente. La storia di ogni forma d'arte conosce periodi critici in cui questa determinata forma mira a certi risultati, i quali potranno per forza essere ottenuti soltanto a un livello tecnico diverso, cioè attraverso una nuova forma d'arte. Now, if I keep doing this is of course very, very short. If I keep doing this, and if I keep speaking in a language of which you don't understand the semantic meaning, the more my language is natural and musical, the more musically complex it will be received by everyone's ears. So that was, for example, a quote by Arthur Benjamin, "The work of art in the age of its technological reproducibility." A book that I love, by the way. So complexity, musically complex, musical complexity is a concept that has been often combined with contemporary music, because contemporary music is widely regarded as being not just difficult, but overly complex. Sometimes so complex that it becomes actually alienated from the external listener, and it fails sometimes to convey its message. This is a cliche that is very common, not only in the broad audience, but also among professional musicians. On the other hand, we know as musicians that, like everything else, to come back to the question at the beginning, what has made composers and audience drift apart during the 20th century, which is, of course, a very interesting topic. To come back to that, we know that, like everything else in the capitalistic world, music has become an industry, and as any other industry, it is sustained by this endless routine of creation and consumption. So this is especially true when it comes to the historicized repertoire, the so-called classical or standard repertoire, where we confront the audience with scores, the same score since several years, hundreds of years. But instead, when it comes to music that has to be created in our very times, we as musicians know that artists are confronting a preliminary choice when making music, when creating new music. And this preliminary choice is to create music for consumption or create music for actual listening. Of course, during and after the season of the great avant-garde, musical avant-garde in the 20th century, experimental music by definition has not been conceived for passive consumption, but it has been conceived for listening and also deep listening. So on the other hand, passive consumption, which is totally fine for an industry logic, it doesn't actually require listening, it just requires hearing. But as Paulina Oliveros teaches us, there is a substantial difference between hearing and listening. So I would just like to quote her again by saying that the ear hears, the brain listens, and the body senses vibration. Listening is constant interplay, constant collaboration, and constant connection. These are Paulina Oliveros' words. As musicians who are collaborating to curate an entire festival, so we acknowledge the responsibility that we have to nourish and reinforce the habit of deep listening in the audience. And this is not only for the contemporary music industry's sake, but to really express the contribution that contemporary music can bring to society as an art form that is designed for this constant interplay between senses and intellect. So during our long curatorial process, we realized that we wanted to give a lot of space to scores and composers who make a strong statement around this broad and interesting theme of listening. And also, and this is very important, to try to spread the act of listening outside of the concert hall by, for example, featuring sound walls around the city of Lucerne. So the element of collaboration and interaction has been really one of the main compass that we have decided to follow during our creation process. And we have been asking ourselves also, how can we naturally foster listening in our audience, if not by making room for their active contribution in the music making? And this brings me, of course, to one of the pieces that embody this concept better than any other pieces probably on the program. This piece is of course Water and Memory by Anja Lockwood, which Ettore talked a little bit last time. And this is a piece that deliberately follows this path, the path of deep listening and active contribution. Water and Memory is a piece that, first of all, uses space in a very creative way, because sound is coming all around from its specialized, and the group are distributed in the whole. And it's based on the humming of a single word, which is water, but in 3 different languages, which are Hindi, Thai, and Hebrew. Again, the theme of speaking in languages that for most of us are incomprehensible, but then by talking them, they become actually music naturally to our ears. They come alive as music. So in this piece, the element of humming is very important. Humming is, of course, as you can imagine, it's the origin of speaking, the origins of singing. So it's the primal act of music making that we can produce, that we can all produce with our body and with our mouth. So as Anja Lockwood says in the concert notes, the piece may be performed by non-professional musicians, of course. So there is this very valuable element of collaboration that we really care about, but it also uses the space to deepen the listening experience and redefines the ritual element of a traditional concert, in which, of course, there is a clear repartition of roles between the ones who are making music and the ones who are just sitting there and listening. So using the space, this is a third, I would say a third theme that has been really coming back many times in our discussions. And to quote once again Paulina Oliveros, she says that performance space is as important as voices and as instruments in the music performance. So space is, of course, a word that has become extremely problematic after the latest historical events, because physical space has been reducing considerably around all of us. And at the same time, of course, we have access to a virtually infinite space, which is digital content in the internet. And of course, we find a lot of music on the internet, and we are constantly able to reach music on the internet digitally. And often, although music in the digital world is often combined, if not subordinated to images, and not always is very easy or very clear to realize ourselves if we are just listening, if we're just hearing, or if you're actually listening. So the lack of a physical shared space, I would say, is something that we wanted to address and to put under, under focus in a problematic and creative way. So we have tried to put physical space at the center of our discussion and to trigger ideas that could engage creatively the space that we have at our disposal during the festival. For example, by putting this, specifying in the call for commissions, for new commissions, for open to all composers, that they will have, or they can actually conceive their chamber music piece for a specific spot in the KKL concert hall in order to use the space creatively and in order to really make space a tool for deepening the listening experience from the audience. So these are some of the topics that are related to listening. And I would like also to address the fact that we were speaking about last time graphic scores and how each composer has his own, or tries to find his own visual language to convey a musical world, which is inside him or inside her. So listening is, of course, the primal act for any musician. And I would like to ask you and to let you reflect whenever you have time on the possibility of just starting to listen as a musician or as a composer. How do you think a composer or a musician listens to the many stimuluses that are around him? I think that the way every composer listens is greatly reflected in the way that they decide to shape their scores and find visual languages to convey, of course, this inner world, which has been listened before. So to show you this, the solution that Paulino Riveros found to this question, how do I put on paper in the form of a visual score my inner world, I would really like to share with you the picture of Out of the Dark, which is one of the pieces, actually the piece that we are going to perform during the festival. I will try to share the screen and I hope everything will work. Yes. This is the score of Out of the Dark by Paulino Riveros. If some of you were present at the last meeting and at the last webinar, the score that Edward showed you was also very unfamiliar and very unorthodox, I would say, for someone who hasn't ever been in contact with a graphic score. But as you can see here, we still have a very strange compound of symbols, at the same time completely different from what Edward showed you last time. The only recognizable element to anyone, I would say, well, we have, of course, on a cavity violino, you have a key here, and we have a note. So this is probably the only element that a non-musician could recognize as music. But all the rest is structured as a mandala. So as a sacred circle that starts from the center and describes a whole universe departing from an origin sound. And these are just indications. So also very vague indications: free improvisation, listen, rhythmic interpretation. And these are just indications that somehow realize the idea of Paulino Riveros. So the idea, the sound world that she has in mind is so vast and wide and deep and also welcoming to everything that she is trying to convey visually this welcoming nature of listening through this tool of the score conceived as a mandala, as a circled mandala. So if you would like to finally know how such a piece would sound, then just please come to our concert and see for yourself, and I would say listen for yourself.
Thank you, Ettore. That score, I think it's almost like a letter from a composer to a musician, and through musician to the audience member. And I think hearing from the composer is always a treat. And today we have that treat here with us, composer Jesse Cox. And before we start a little interview with him, I would like to remind everyone to use the Q&A section so that everyone will see your questions, and then you will also see our responses. And since Jesse is here, use that chance and ask him questions in the Q&A. I'm sure he would love to hear your thoughts. And now I will pass on to Ben Roidl-Ward, who will continue with Jesse. Thank you, Ben.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today for this webinar. My name is Ben Roidl-Ward. I'm a bassoonist and a member of the Contemporary Leaders, and I'm coming to you from Chicago today. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming composer Jesse Cox, who is one of the people that we'll be working with in the Forward Festival. We'll be commissioning a new work of Jesse's that will be featured on our Saturday evening program. I've personally known Jesse for about 4 years now and have been really just astonished by the breadth and the amazing experimental qualities of his music. And I'm really excited that we're going to be featuring him today. He's currently pursuing a doctorate at Columbia University in New York City, but he's joining us today from his home in Switzerland. So welcome, Jesse. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me, everyone. I'm really excited to be part of this exciting new festival.
Well, it's great to have you. Can you first just introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them about yourself as a composer and as a person.
Yes, of course. So I guess, as you said, I'm calling in right now from my home, well, the place where I was born in Biel, Switzerland, in my grandma's house. And that's also where my musical journey began. I was doing drum set, as well as composition studies here in Biel. And then I moved to the US, where I continued my practice as a composer and performer, first in Boston and then in New York. And I would say my work is influenced by, as you said, numerous experimental artists, both composers and performers. So that bridge is always there for me. There's never really a separation between the two. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit more about some ideas or some priorities that influence you in your music?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I guess I really like, well, let's first unpack maybe experimentalism, or the idea that, you try something that makes you maybe even dream of something else, with very limited means sometimes. And this is sort of a stance for me that is very important to be able to have, that you can make a sound and from that sound imagine the world to be different, or imagine to enact change in the world just with a sound. So to me, music is experimental in that sense. And of course, I'm a huge Sun Ra fan, for example. So Afrofuturism is very near and dear to me as well, which is basically a way of also experimental way of dealing also with the spaces that we inhabit, of dealing with the way that we imagine a future. So for me, it's very important to create some type of way for us to imagine futures so that we can move on forward, as the festival title suggests as well. Yeah.
I love that. And I read on your website, you say that your music takes into consideration ideas of time travel and space exploration. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, because in the last year, that's really started for me to think very explicitly like that about my musical practice, because I think it started when the lockdown happened, the pandemic lockdown happened. I was in New York City, in Brooklyn, in a nice but small apartment with my partner, and suddenly you're just inside all the time because there's not really, people didn't really go outside in New York. And I felt that, as much as I loved the internet, what was bothering me about it was that everything I was engaging with on the internet was news or Facebook, things that were so curated that I couldn't dream. That's literally what I said to myself. And so I decided to make this TV series, which was just basically mean I would compose and perform every week and record myself this piece that I would develop over weeks, and present it, and basically through that allow myself to dream again for another way of inhabiting the world and living. And that's when I really started thinking about space travel and time travel to conceptualize musical sounds and relationships and things like that. Exactly.
That's fantastic. And if anyone at home is interested in checking this out, you can see it's called A Space Travel from Home is Jesse's series, and they're all available on YouTube, right?
Yes, they're on YouTube. Exactly.
So if you go to his channel, you'll be able to see the entire series, which I've been following throughout the pandemic. It was one of those things that, gave me some regularity, something to look forward to every week. So I'm grateful to you for that.
Oh, wow, that's so nice to hear. Thanks for checking it out.
Of course. So my next question for you is about the theme of our festival this year, which is networks. And, that's a word that has a lot of different implications for us as human beings, for us as musicians. Can you talk a little bit about what that idea means to you, especially kind of as a musician navigating this time?
Yeah, so of course there is this, what I hinted to before, the networks in terms of the internet and social media or YouTube, Google, things like that. So sort of where I felt I had to make interventions in with music, which also at the same time allowed me to do this, right, to reach people. It is on YouTube, the TV series. So, but networks to me is also important because to think about diaspora, for example. Specifically for me, I would think a lot about Afro diaspora, as well as Glissant. Glissant made this beautiful intervention into concept of networks in his book, A Poetics of Relation. And it is basically, he's saying there that we should really consider what the network is like. The networks are not neutral. And so I'm very inspired by his writing, and I've created this opera where I kind of thought of the drum set as a amalgamation of network, right? Every piece that comes together in this instrument that I play, the drum set, somehow connects me to something else, right? Or connects the drum set to something else, and through that also me. This includes the snare drum, right? Which there is a long tradition actually here in Switzerland of snare drum playing, which I also study a lot from. Or the cymbal, which moved from the Middle East to America, became Siljan Company, and then through Baby Dots became the ride cymbal. And that is then part of my instrument and part of my language. So this network is part of my thinking. So to do that, I created a piece where I would attach threads made out of yarn to each piece of the drums and connect it to the walls. And so I would distribute the drums. And throughout the piece, what happens is I would collect together all the instruments and create a drum set. Now, this, of course, also speaks to how networks are a question of how we relate to space, how we relate to each other, how we relate to sound. So to me, networks is that kind of question. How do we think our relationship to our environment? How do we think our relationship to each other, et cetera, et cetera? And so this is maybe my answer to the question.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And can people see this opera online somewhere as well?
Yes, you can see it online, but it's just not very good documentation, but there will be a movie coming out probably in about half a year or a year of this opera.
Excellent,
So.
excellent. I can't wait to see it. So my last question for you is, can you tell us a little bit more about the piece that you're working on for the Forward Festival? What can audience members expect to see in this piece?
Yeah, so I'm trying to not reveal too much right now because I had thought, oh, okay, I will tell everyone about everything. And then I realized if I do that, I kind of take away some of the fun for you. So, okay, I'm going to try to say as much as possible without spoiling the surprises. One thing that I did in this opera with this yarn threads is I attached small bells on the threads. And the bells since then have become part of my language, I think. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because I like, the scenery here. We always walk past some animals with bells, and it makes a beautiful sound. Or maybe it's because of Fastnacht, which is kind of carnival, I guess we could call it in English, where also some performers wear bells, and drums are there very featured too. But bells also start having another meaning because George Lewis, my teacher, actually mentioned to me that slaves used to wear bells. And of course, that makes total sense, right? If we think about what I just said, that the bells were also used to control livestock, right? So this dissonance, I think I want to sit with, because I think it's important for us to think about that. And there has recently been, I think mainly in the last year, more of a thinking here in Switzerland about the relationship of Switzerland to colonialism and slavery and racism. And I think it's a very beautiful way to also say, how can we move forward? Because there is another way to move forward here that I would like to show, which can take this as something that we can sit with and that we can stand with Black lives. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jesse. I want to open it up to, I think we have a couple minutes for questions from the audience. If anyone would like to ask Jesse something, you can put that in the Q&A, or if you'd like to ask him a question live, you can raise your hand, and then I believe Felix will let you in to ask that live. While we're waiting for those to come in, Jesse, can you let people know where they can go to find your work?
Oh, yes, of course. On my website, Jesse Cox Music, you can pretty much find everything. I try to keep it as updated as I can.
Excellent, excellent. So I guess we'll wait just a moment. Are there any questions from the audience before we move on? Okay, it looks like Winnie has a question.
No, sorry, that's Jack, actually. He's just tuned in.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, Jesse, I just really want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today and to share, give some insight into your musical practice and into this work that we're really, really excited to have as part of the festival. And I think I speak for all of us as leaders that we feel really lucky to get to work with you this fall, and I can't wait to see how that collaboration turns out. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm very much looking forward to it and very thankful to get to be part of this. Thank you.
Oh, wait just a second. I think we just had one question come in. This is from my mom, actually. My mom asked, Jesse, do you hear the earth humming too?
Oh, well, that's a beautiful question. Well, I think it's very interesting. I actually wrote a piece where I kind of listen to the earth and try to understand what this is about. The earth is really noisy in outer space, but that makes sense. I mean, that we make a lot of sound here. So the earth is full of music. So yeah, I hear the earth humming, and I hear it screaming, and I hear it singing. I think we need to be aware that there is a lot going on this planet, and I don't think humming is enough to call the sound of earth.
I think that's a great answer. Well, thank you again.
Thank you for the question, by the way. Yeah, thank you.
My goodness, thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Ben. I am also very much looking forward to the piece. This sounds incredibly exciting, and I love how you held the suspense and didn't reveal too much because, yeah, good job. Yeah, because now I want to hear more about it, of course. Yeah, as you can see, or the audience, like talking to the composer and finding out about their thoughts and ideas behind their music is always so rewarding. And today I would like to invite another composer and a performer to join us for a little discussion about the very unique experience that we will provide our audience with in November. So welcome composer Charlie Strowledge from Australia joining us today, and Winnie Huang, also Australian performer, but not from Australia today. Today joining us from Italy. And I'm joining you all from Finland, so this is very, very much an international call. And we're going to talk about this very special piece, Tend, for the performer and the listener. And I would like to just dive in directly and ask Charlie, what is Tend and what is one-to-one concert?
Thank you, Helga. It's wonderful to be here. Gosh, it's going to be difficult to describe without going too far into spoilers, but I'll try to talk in the most general terms possible. So Tend is a piece for one performer, Winnie, and one audience member at a time, and it's a very quiet, intimate experience. And in the simplest terms, it's about attending to one another. Listening to other people as the basis of empathy and rapport. So Winnie essentially performs gestures and sounds that we associate with listening, observing, and attending attitudes. And as the piece unfolds, she gradually adapts her performance in response to each audience member's listening and behavior. How exactly she does that, and the sort of the journey that you go on, will keep as a secret. But of course, she acknowledges, she addresses, she coordinates perhaps, and it becomes a kind of wordless social exchange, somewhere in between performance art and music. And since no audience member is like any other, no person behaves quite in the same way as another person. Each performance is unique to the specific dynamic of the people involved. So that's the sort of overarching.
Well, we definitely learned that the composers are very mysterious when they talk about their music. Nobody wants to reveal their secrets, which is absolutely fine and wonderful. I found on your website amazing words. Intimacy, nuance, and quietude are the core themes of Charlie Strowledge's creative practice. I think that's wonderful, and I think probably that, in a way, sums up also that piece. And you mentioned that it's a piece for Winnie, and I took a look at the score, and again, urging everybody to check out Charlie's website as well, because there you can also see the beautiful scores of the pieces. And in the score there, Winnie's photos, so it is definitely a piece for Winnie. Is it a piece that is unique just to her and for her, or can somebody else also learn it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm sure Winnie will chime in after I've said my little bit. Well, I mean, as all of you know, or as many of you may know, and or we'll find out during the festival, Winnie's brilliant. Of course, I'm a fan, and she has a very rare mix of different skills and capabilities, a social intelligence, and a sort of extremely experienced as a contemporary music performer on the violin, and then also an extraordinary control of her body and movement. And so from that perspective, I guess I couldn't have written this piece without Winnie. that said, I mean, the composition is a kind of persona. It's not exactly Winnie. It's not Winnie either. It's somewhere in between. So it is a character. It is a mindset. It's a sort of way of approaching an interactive situation. And I think as a result, a lot is left open to the performer, and that openness sort of holds space for other potential sort of interpreters and other takes on it. So it would be very different, and it's hard to imagine it without her, but I think it could be done. What do you think, Winnie?
I absolutely support the idea of having someone else perform it in the future. I think it would be an incredible experience. I would love to be the audience member of that. How it would be done, I think, would need a deep collaboration between Charlie and that new performer, and also myself, to give my opinions on it. But it would be amazing to see also someone else perform it.
So this was a collaboration. This piece was created, two of you together.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, we had numerous conversations and in-person workshops and sort of filmed workshops and all of that to kind of tune the particular movements and to sort of discover the tenor, the qualities of the piece.
Well, as Charlie mentioned, Winnie, you are a violin player. Violin is your first instrument, let's say, but you do a lot of music that involves gestures. For example, you did phenomenal work on monumental piece Ettore by Stockhausen during the Lucerne Festival. And do you think being aware of your body like that, does it help you in your violin playing, or is it something that maybe is not as helpful, or does it affect your violin player? Are you violinist and musical gestural performer separately, or do the two people intertwine?
I strongly believe that it helps me as a violinist. If anything, I believe everything helps us to be every other part of us in our life. You know, everything we learn and everything we get inspiration from actually can aid in some other part of us. And the more richer we are with experiences and the more willingness we are to be open to different nuances makes us better expressive makers or dialogists or communicators. And that's how I view artists. So we're just communicating. It doesn't really matter what tool we're using, whether it be a body or a violin. I think every aspect of how we learn and how we choose to communicate can benefit that communication.
That's wonderful. It's true that it's all about the expression after all, no matter the tool. I wanted to ask Charlie why the member of the audience, why there needs to be somebody to put in that, for sure, for some people might be a rather stressful situation to sit there and interact in such an intense and very intimate way with the performer.
Well, I can assure everyone that it's meditative, it's warm, it's generous. It's not a sort of test or a confrontation or anything like along those lines. But I mean, for me, it was about human connection. And I suppose in a lot of concert experiences, audience behaviors are bracketed out through lighting, through distance, through the design of our concert halls. So, you know, as a performer, you don't get that eye contact or the tension in the shoulders or the postural shifts necessarily, except in the most general, non-specific way. But sensitivity to those types of cues are key to our day-to-day lives. They're what convey emotions, impressions, things that define our interpersonal relationships. So with Tend, it was about enfolding the audience into a situation where there's space to sort of include these behaviors, to develop perhaps in the best of circumstances, a kind of behavioral attunement or sensitivity to these sort of subtle non-verbal dynamics, or simply space to reflect upon them. So it's kind of framing music as a social encounter. Two people attending to one another in this kind of quiet exchange, exercising empathetic imaginations and finding ways to be co-present with one another, connecting with one another, responsive to one another.
That is a beautiful thought. And the timing of the piece, so it was written in 2019. Was it written pre the troubling times?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the piece just probably changed a lot, or your understanding of the piece, or the audience's understanding of the piece. I'm sure the pandemic affected that in these troubling times. And for you, Winnie, as well, to perform after not being able to perform for such a long time and suddenly get that intimate connection. How does that change the piece? Or does it?
I mean, definitely. Every time you perform a piece, it changes slightly. But we did a concert series of this in Manchester just before lockdown, a month before. And I was very affected by how important that was to me to perform this. I didn't know lockdown was coming, but it just felt good to be with people. And ever since the last year and a half, I just can't stop reflecting on how close I was to humans, and how much communication I was doing without saying a single word that 1 month before lockdown. And suddenly it just all stopped. And I am so excited to do this piece again. It's been a year and a half. I don't know how it will be completely done concretely because of the fact that we do have changing rules, but we are trying to make sure that we are performing it in the most original manner possible, but we will adapt if necessary as we move forward. And I just really hope that whatever happens when we are together, when I am with that one person in that room together, that it's a similar but a different experience of togetherness.
Yeah, there's no substitute for face-to-face interaction, and hopefully the experience offers some sort of I don't know, space to kind of heal some of that habituated social distance.
Oh, yes. Healing is something that I'm sure we all will be needing at some point. Actually, we have an audience question for Charlie. Do you intend the performer and the listener as instruments, as material when you're composing, Charlie?
No, I mean, it's not. I'm trying to think of the people involved, and as very multi-layered, complex. I don't know, and materials can be that, I suppose, but I'm very much thinking of it in terms of a relational experience, as setting up particular individualized non-verbal dynamics between Winnie and each specific person in a space that's sort of non-judgmental. There's no third party to kind of report on what happened. And so, yeah, it's not for me. It's not about materiality. It's about that connection, that momentary connection that can occur in many different ways, that unfolds through time.
Wonderful. And I think I'm really glad that we had you here today. Thank you for being here, because if anybody thought that could be an intimidating situation and would maybe be a bit nervous to sign up for this experience, I think after seeing you guys and talking to you, I think we will have a long line of people coming to see this, to experience this performance. Thank you so much for being here. I would like to remind everybody to put your questions in the Q&A for Winnie and Charlie. And just as a side note, in our festival program, we don't have it in the actual festival program, but something very special will be happening also with Winnie's initiation. She proposed the project proposal of the TikTok the piece that she composed herself. And this will be a pre-concert event that will tune everybody into the concert that will be following. And Winnie, as the really professional in the musical gestural world and doing even research in that area, that will be exciting experience for everybody to be taking in and swoop into that form of music. Thank you both so much for being here today with us.
Thank you, Helga.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I would like to remind everybody that there's a Q&A. We have a few minutes to answer some questions, and there were a couple of questions that came up. One of them is, how exactly did the process of collaboration between artists who sent you project proposals and the festival look like? So give us a specific example if you can. And maybe Edward Cass, who was here answering your questions in the Q&A. Now you will get to see his face. Hi, Eddie.
Hi, thanks, Helga, for passing this along to me. So we have this great question from Josef in Prague about the process of collaboration between the artists who submitted proposals and those of us curating the festival. So there was a call to the alumni network from the Lucerne Festival to submit ideas as part of this new festival. And starting this festival, of course, was like a blank slate. So when those of us as contemporary leaders got together to start reviewing these projects, a big part of the early discussions was trying to, amongst ourselves, figure out what themes we wanted to highlight and how or whether each of these proposals would fit within these themes. So one of the things that a lot of us were really interested in was looking at different aspects of the performer audience relationship, just as like what was discussed by Winnie and Charlie in Tend, what Ettore talked about with Pauline Oliveros and Anea Lockwood as ways to involve and like immerse the audience. So perhaps a good example of the way this process worked is looking at the Joao Pacheco's suggestion of Michael Pizarro's Rice Fall. So when Joao submitted this project, it was proposed as a collaboration between the performers as well as community members in Lucerne, because this piece by Michael Pizarro doesn't require the performers to be musicians. It's for a variable number of people. And so he proposed it as a way to have community members sign up to join a workshop and then be part of this performance. So we found that really appealing as a way to create a special kind of immersive and engaging performance experience for community members in Lucerne. But we were like, okay, we need to figure out how this one thing, which on its own is not enough for a full concert, how will this fit with other projects we're thinking of? And will Joao, who created this proposal, feel like that represents his idea? So as we were trying to conceive of how this would work, we thought, oh, maybe this will work really well in the KKL concert hall with groups of Rice Fall performers spread throughout the hall. And we can use this as a jumpstart to our program of brand new commissions, which will also take advantage of space throughout the hall. So we talked to Joao about whether this worked with his concept and how we could best involve the largest number of community members. And it turns out it works because of Joao's position and relationship with the Neue Musikforum in Lucerne, that he could help lead this in the community workshops, which gives him place and connection in Lucerne, and thematically it connects to these other commissions that we're performing. So we're like, okay, great. Now this is a project proposal and a concept that we've now wedded together with the themes that the contemporary leaders were talking about as important for the concert. And so each of the proposals that we've adapted or the proposals that we've brought in came with this kind of discussion amongst all the leaders in this group, as we tried to make an arc that had some sort of dramaturgy throughout the concert or throughout the festival, and there was cohesion. So I hope this answers some of what you want. If anyone else in the webinar wants to chime in, or we can move on to some of the other questions we've gotten.
Thank you, Eddie. I think this is really, really detailed, and I think it is also an important question to answer because we do respect and appreciate transparency and within our Lucerne Festival Forward community and amongst the contemporary leaders. So thank you, Eddie, for that. And we have one more question. How do you see the works of Concert 3? So that's the concert with the Rice Fall by Michael Pizarro, working within the arc of the Forward Festival. So I would pass this question to Ben.
Sure, thank you, Helga. And I think it's a good question. This, for me personally, the third concert, which will be the Michael Pizarro Rice Fall, and then 5 or 6 new commissions, is one of the ones that I'm most excited for in this festival. I think kind of when we were thinking about the arcs of the programming, there are these 2 themes that we have, the one being the theme of network and the other theme of being forward. You know, how do we move forward as a festival? How do we move music forward? How do we think about that? And I think early on in our discussions as a group of contemporary leaders, it became clear that it was important to us to actively participate in the creation of new works and to support composers and not only composers that we already knew, but to expand the network of the composers who were featured at the Lucerne Festival and whose music we knew and got to play. And so what we ended up doing is we put out an open call for commissions, which is actually closing tomorrow, I believe, on the 31st. So if there's any composers in the audience, you still have about 24 hours to get a proposal in. But our idea is to commission between 5 and 6 new works for an ensemble that's based on our Concert 2, the Saturday evening program, for subsets of that instrumentation. And for me, it's just so exciting to be able to participate in the creation of a whole new concert's worth of repertoire. You know, it's not often that a festival is able to do that. And so I think we're all really grateful to have the support and the vision of Mark and Felix to help us in doing that. And the last thing, which Eddie also mentioned, is that, you know, a thing that we're thinking about is how do we use these incredible spaces that we have at our disposal in Lucerne? I mean, for anyone who's been in the KKL, you know just what an extraordinary space it is. And so we're kind of asking the question of how can we most fully utilize this space? What steps can we take to explore it in new ways rather than just having an orchestra or a soloist on stage? And so the spacing of the Rice Fall groups is an element of that. And in our call for commissions, we also encouraged composers to think about ways to utilize that space creatively. So we included a map of the concert hall as part of the call for commissions, and we asked composers to propose ways that their music could fill that space in a new way. And so those are kind of a couple of elements that I think really make this a part of our arc of programming in a way that I think is going to be really effective. And I can't wait to see the proposals that we've received and get to work on them. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, this will be exciting times to choose pieces. I hope we get lots of proposals. It will be exciting. I think we don't have more questions. I think that it seems that was it. And at the end, I just want to thank you, everybody. Thank you, our wonderful composer guest, Jesse. Thank you, Charlie. Round of applause, virtual applause. Thank you, Winnie, for joining us and talking about the one-to-one experience. And thank you to my colleagues, to my dear panelists, Edward, Ben, Ettore. Thank you for today. And thank you for the panelists from the last webinar who started this webinar journey so wonderfully, Winnie, Stephen, and Eddie. And thank you, Felix. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, our wonderful audience and our listeners. And thank you for the wonderful questions. Remember to check our Instagram, our Facebook, Lucerne Festival website. There will be all the news, all the updates on the registrations for Rice Fall, for example, and check out our program. Let us know on the social media platforms, what do you think about the program? Which composers were surprising names for you? Who did you know from before? What are you looking forward to most in the festival? Thank you, everyone, and I wish everyone a lovely, lovely weekend. Thank you.